was very difficult to step out and go to another hospital during peak COVID, but I didn't have an option.
Could you
And
briefly describe all the symptoms that you were facing during this particular time?
Sure. So, physiologically, I had palpitations. I had cold, hot, not cold, hot flashes. I would break into a cold sweat, and
Yeah,
all of these were for no apparent reason. These were not
there was
induced by
no
a
trigger
trigger. There was no trigger. The only thing that was causing the palpitations maybe was it started with medication. So how I now make sense of it is that I have always been in the anxiety spectrum. The medication maybe propelled me into the clinical side, the pathological
point. Right.
side. That was like the final nail in the coffin. Like I was going through it like for about 10, 12 years, and then finally the medication, something in the COVID medication, may have interacted with my neurotransmitters and started my palpitations, and that pushed
Mhm.
me to the clinical side. So my
Right.
physiological symptoms were massive palpitations, breaking into a cold sweat, dizzying spells. I would faint at the minute I was panicked about something, the minute there was this impending sense of doom, the minute I heard something. Till date, I pass out. I have fainted in front of doctors. I have fainted at home. I have gotten up in the morning and like I've gotten up and then fallen back on bed because I've fainted. So fainting is a huge symptom. There's this tightness in my chest that I feel. What else? If I talk about my of course, panic attacks. Yes, panic disorder may, of course, I have these frequent and unexpected panic attacks. Now they're much less because I think I'm also on medication, and a whole lot of therapy has helped. I also now know techniques like, I think it's been 3 years, so I've also understood my body, and I've also understood what works with me, what doesn't work with me. So I have also worked out my techniques that have helped me cope
Mhm.
with my situation. Then
Yes.
there is this sudden wave of fear or discomfort or a sense of losing control, even when there is no clear danger or trigger, like I told you.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to say this out loud. A lot of times people feel that if they have panic attacks, then they have panic disorders. I think these terms cannot be used interchangeably. Just because somebody has panic attacks doesn't mean they necessarily have panic disorder. A panic
Yeah, I
attack is
think
a
that's
very,
crucial difference that you point out over here.
yeah. A lot of times I also see clients coming up to me and saying that they probably have panic disorder because they have recurrent panic attacks. That while that may be the case, it's not necessarily the case. It's also important to understand that anxiety or panic attacks even is a very normal human response to anything that our body perceives to be a threat, or
Mhm.
when something in our bodies or our mind is not in calibration. So it's like we have physiological responses like hunger and thirst. Anxiety is also a part of that repartee. It is only a problem. Anxiety only becomes an anxiety disorder when the symptoms are so debilitating that it impairs our ability to be functional across all aspects of our life. Only then is it a disorder. So in pop culture, these terms are used very casually.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly. And I think
yeah,
social
not
media has
helped at
worsened
all.
this exactly because now everyone diagnoses them with having anxiety disorder when in fact it might be just some normal anxiety that people face.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I think
absolutely.
it's very crucial. Like even for the listeners, right? I would not suggest that you go on diagnosing yourself through symptoms that you see on Instagram
Yeah.
or Google. It's not it's best to just go to a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist and let them diagnose you.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and can you also talk about how important has uh, taking medications and psychiatry therapy been for
Hmm.
you in this whole journey?
Oh my God, that was also such a journey. I think, in spite of being from the profession, I too had my fair share of reservation with respect to having medication, because we hear so many stories, right? There's so much
Mhm.
misinformation. And I had no experience with taking medication. I had, even though I was studying this, I had no experience even speaking with somebody who was on medication. So I must have, I'm not even kidding. And it's not like I could step out, right? There was COVID. Stephen, I must have called up at least 100 people, teachers,
Mm.
people in the discipline, fellow psychologists. I couldn't speak to a psychiatrist because back then I didn't know any psychiatrist. I spoke to a lot of people, and I kept, because I had been put on this SOS medication and I didn't know if I should take it, because here I was thinking that what if this medication changes something in my brain chemistry and I'm no longer the person I used to be? Like, what if I become a whole other person? What if this changes my personality? I didn't
Mhm.
know the concept of SSRIs. I did not know that, most medication is simply directed at least in the spectrum of my condition, are directed at making our our brain receptors a little more receptive towards taking in neurotransmitters. I don't know if this
Mm.
is sounding too technical, but it's just that they function at just improving the organ capacity. They don't change your personality, or they don't make you a whole other person, or they don't make your brain completely dependent on medicine. I had
Yes.
no idea about this. I was diagnosed with anxiety, and the fact that I had to take medication was fueling my anxiety even more. It was a very, very challenging time. And I've also had my fair shares of ups and downs with the medication as well. Yes, the medicine did make me, okay, how do I put this in a way that it's not misleading? The medicine, to begin with, the medicine really helped. It did not help in the sense that suddenly I was not anxious, or that I was, my panic disorder was cured. No. What the medicine did was it created a conducive environment in my brain to think rationally. It's not like I'm not anxious
Mm.
anymore, or it's not like I don't get panic attacks, or it's not like I'm not thinking of the worst case scenario or catastrophizing even now. I am. But
Yeah.
what it has helped with is that it has created a conducive ecosystem. It has created a conducive environment in my brain, which does enable me to process the way that I'm feeling. So, process my emotional reaction or my emotions, and to be
Mhm.
emotionally regulated in the way that I perceive my thoughts and my feelings. So, what that means is that it has given me the bandwidth to observe my thoughts and feelings and not engage with them, and to ride the wave of that emotion, to witness the emotion or the thought, to bring it in my general awareness, but not participate in it, and to ride that wave of emotion so that once it has been ventilated, I can then think rationally. This, I think, was not happening before I was taking medication. जो एक normal इंसान कर सकता है, what a normal person can do, they can observe their emotions, they can see what their emotions are doing to their physiology, but they needn't necessarily engage with that emotion. They can ride the wave of that emotion. Just this is what we call being emotionally regulated,
Yes.
uh, or having an emotionally regulated nervous system, or emotionally processing. ये चीज़ नहीं होती थी, but medication has helped me do that with, of course, because it has made my brain receptors probably work better. I can sleep better now. Probably can I feel a little less anxiousness, because serotonin is now being taken in by my receptors. So on these levels I feel better, and I can do the rationalizing bit. Also,
Right.
to one a thing that just struck me was, you asked me how I coped before,
Mm.
right? Like what my coping
Yes.
mechanisms were. And I told you my coping mechanisms were maladaptive. I think one massive coping mechanism that I use, and I got reminded of it, excuse me, when I speak with my clients, is that I used to intellectualize a lot, instead of
Mm.
just
Right.
feeling what I was
Could you
feeling and
explain what
sitting.
you mean by intellectualization?
Okay. So what that means is that I never sat with, if I have to say it in very simple language, I never sat with the way that I was feeling. I never sat with the discomfort of what I was feeling, never observed my feelings. I tried to bypass that effort. I tried to bypass that arduous process by intellectually thinking about what I was experiencing. So I was thinking about solutions, I was thinking about what I can do, I was thinking about why this is happening, instead of just
Mm.
being mindful
Yeah.
about the experience, just being present with the experience. I was constantly using cognitive abilities. So my what is cognition? Cognition is your ability to reason, to think, to understand, to process, to analyze. So I was using my
Right.
cognitive abilities to find a way out of that situation instead of processing the situation. So not to say that intellectualization is not necessary, but it can't be used as a replacement for emotional processing.
Yes. When it becomes a major source of how you try to cope with it,
Cope.
then it
Yeah,
becomes a
it's a
problem.
problem. Yes. So that was also something I was doing.
Right. And also during this whole process, like, um,
Hmm.
what were some forms of support that people tried to give you? Okay. And what was helpful to you and what wasn't helpful at all?
Hmm. I'll tell you, I'm sure this is I mean, from what I see even now, this is usually the case. Most people don't know the length and breadth of the condition that I have. Okay.
Hmm.
In fact, not just the condition that I have, but mental health concerns in general. So
Yeah.
a lot of times, like I'll give you an example. For me, sometimes just the idea of being functional is very tiring. I can't step out of bed sometimes. So that is misconstrued as laziness. It's not
Right. Right.
laziness, it's fatigue, it's cerebral exhaustion. Your brain just does not have the bandwidth to be able to do the day, but it's perceived as no, no, you must wake up in the morning. If you wake up in the morning, you'll be able to do it. Don't be lazy, don't I know that. And this is friends and family, and they come from a good place. It's just that sometimes, because they are not initiated about these conditions, they don't have the right kind of tools to be caregivers in this process,
And I
but they
think
do
this
their
also
best.
happens a lot
Yeah.
with people who have depression because
Yeah.
they those some people might not understand what exactly they are going through, and they would just say, "Okay, man, just get up and socialize.
Hmm.
Just get up and get a schedule that's going to
Yeah.
solve all of the problem." But for those individuals, it's not easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
Right? They're going through a lot, right? And I think. Uh, in that particular position for the individual who is going through that, even the
Hmm.
efforts that he's trying to put in, it might feel that he people are not.
They get dismissed because people
Yes.
don't see them. 100%. In fact, okay, I think I should start by saying that I think I'm very privileged that I was not I was not gaslit into thinking that no, all of these conditions don't exist, and this is just a vehem in my head. No,
Mhm.
fortunately, my caregivers, my parents, my friends, my family were very supportive and were very forgiving. Like, I would have so many messages unread on my phone. I would see my phone ringing, but I would not have it in me to pick up the phone and talk. Till today I cannot. You know this, you of all people know this, I think, so much, because we've been trying to record this podcast since, I think, years now.
But
We've been wanting to
for
do
a
this
long
since,
time.
yeah, since 2021 itself. I think you had pitched this idea to me, and we had discussed the idea of collaborating. And this is happening now because finally, there was a deadline, right? Your subscription was going to be up today, and we're finally doing this. So it's not like I was being lazy or I didn't want to do it. For me, the idea of getting ready for a task and to then deliver
Mhm.
is like jumping through fire hoops. It's very debilitating. In fact, I thought I'll take a nap before this podcast, but all through the nap I just found myself hyperventilating about this podcast.
Yeah.
So, circling back to what I was discussing, so many instances like that, not being able to keep up with social commitments, appointments, calls, messages, nothing, but being constantly fixating on the fact that I have to reply. So again, a hamster wheel. I'm not replying, but I'm fixating about replying, which is further not giving me the bandwidth to reply. A lot of times, people don't have the patience for this kind of thing, and that's understandable. Not everybody
Mm.
has to understand this, or not everybody, even if they understand, they don't have to tolerate it in their lives. Some people have tolerated it. Parents, I must give it to my parents. They've really they saw me through this whole thing, and they've been nothing but supportive in the best way they could, in whatever limited understanding they had of the condition. They took the initiative to educate themselves about it. Even today,
Mm.
each day is new information for me and for them. But what I find extremely beautiful, and that I'm supremely grateful, I'm superlatively privilege, and I thank my stars every single day for that luxury, is that never have I been never have they held it against me. Never have they've always given me room to grow, room to help myself out of the condition at my pace, and also room to fall, crash and collapse, and then come back up at my own pace. um
I think it's
so
really a
it,
big blessing when, especially
yeah,
when people who are close to you, they
yeah,
understand you, because uh,
absolutely.
then it kind of gives you a great support and great courage to just move
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. And also because the suffering is so solitary, right? It's not like, a physical condition where people come to the hospital to see you. Here, there is no wound to show. So most people don't even know that you're suffering, and you don't even have the bandwidth to go out in the world and tell people,
Right, right, right.
to continue your relationships. So you really hold on tight. You really depend on your caregivers, on your immediate family, on your immediate social support, and for them to see you through this process and be supportive, I think is a huge non-negotiable for any person going through a mental health concern or a condition.
Mm-hmm.
um, we all know, right, as students of psychology, we know that healing is never linear, it's quantum, right? And so it's important that your caregivers or people who are around you in your process of healing or your process of just going through this condition don't I mean, they also know that your progress is not going to be linear. So just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean you're going to continuously have bad days, or just because you have a good day doesn't mean you're continuously going to have a good day. And that requires a lot of patience. See, we know it because we see it, we experience it. They, as in, as patients or as people suffering from a condition. So as psychologists, we
Yeah.
know it, we have the patience for it because we've studied it. But everybody else has no reason to be patient towards it. It can be very frustrating to live with, a very young, person who ideally should be going out in the world, exploring, having great, experiences in life, to be locked in a room going through this condition. But to be patient through it
Yeah.
all, and to understand the quantum nature of healing, I think is something that I was blessed with and I don't take for granted ever. Not a single minute of a single.
So, what would you say are the major things that you learned in this whole journey?
I think, like I said, children don't diet. Like, if you are a young person, or if you know a young person who's in their 15, I mean, in their teens, in their
Hmm.
school, college, growing up years, there are no shortcuts to well being. So please don't take that route. Don't stop eating because your brain is not completely formed, your body is not completely formed, and you need that nutrition. Your body needs that nutrition. If you really want to look a certain way, if you want to have a certain body tone, work out under supervision, have nutritious balanced meals, don't diet. I know this sounds very like advice which is done to death with, but
Hmm.
since that was the propeller of my condition, I can't emphasize. If I could go back in time, this would be one thing that I change. I would go give like two slaps, like one jhap to my 15-year-old self, and I would not let myself diet, because my life would have probably looked very different if I didn't. So that is one. Don't use shortcuts to achieve well-being, because the shelf life of that well-being will be barely anything. Think long term when you're thinking of well-being, and even if it takes longer, know that what you're trying to lose, what you're trying to shed wasn't built overnight. Therefore, what you're trying to achieve may also, unless you're God's favorite child, may also not be able to be attained overnight. So if you truly want it, stick through the process, put in the work. Even
So I
if it's
think that's
tough,
very powerful, and a good piece of advice.
I really, it's easier said than done, but I really hope that it sits in the, subconscious mind of hopefully whoever's listening, and whoever they speak with. Another thing that I will say is that, hmm, even if you are in the throes of this condition, even if you don't feel like, even if you know that you need to do things but you aren't being able to do those things, if you feel like you're probably pissing away your life, you're wasting the prime of your life in this condition, I want I can tell you from personal experience that it is absolutely possible to lead a decent quality of life in spite having any kind of mental health condition, neurotic, or perhaps even psychotic.
Hmm.
All one needs to do is to decide first of all, to have the conviction and to truly feel it in your bones that you truly want to help yourselves and you're open to change, you're open to recalibration, you're open to putting in the work, and help is available. Needn't even be
Hmm.
expensive. If you feel help is expensive, it needn't even be expensive. There are more than enough platforms that give you pro bono and subsidized services. So I'm not just talking therapy. Like you said, therapy is just part of the process, but there are various other resources that you can use, and you don't have to compromise on the quality of your life. It's not, honestly, it's not the end of your life. It's a condition, like a physical condition. It's just not visible and it's just not spoken about enough, which is why it is usually considered to be, I mean, there's so much misinformation that's attached to it that it's usually perceived in a very negative light. It really doesn't have to be that negative. It's very
Hmm.
manageable. I wouldn't take away from the debilitating experience of it. It is hard. It does make you, like, it makes you fall on your knees and crash to the ground sometimes. Yes, maybe, depending on where you are on the severity spectrum. But it can still, I don't know if things around you will be okay, but you can still be okay if you do what is required to be done. I
Yes.
think, sorry, are you saying something?
Yes, I think it's very important thing that you pointed out that it's going to be a long process.
Hmm.
A lot of the times, it's going to be
Yeah.
a long process, and it just does not mean, yeah. And also for all the people who
Hmm.
are going through their own mental health journey, right? Uh,
Hmm.
it's our first thing is to go for quick fixes, right?
Yeah.
And
Correct.
generally that's not the way that things go, and like even in life in
Hmm.
general, yeah, that's not the way how things would go. So have
Hmm.
patience, stick with the
Yeah.
process, and things things will
Yeah.
start to change little by little.
But Stephen, I feel what you're saying also happens because people aren't informed. So I see so many
Exactly.
people trying to numb the way that they're feeling by using reckless coping mechanisms like substances, alcohol, food as emotional support because they simply don't know what they simply don't even, okay, number one, they don't know if what they're feeling is normal. Two, they don't know even if they validate what they're feeling, they don't know what to do about it. So I feel things that you're doing, bringing these conversations into the mainstream, normalizing these conversations, talking to people about these concerns like you're talking to them about some physical health concern, is very important so that people start treating resources and support for mental health like they treat, let's say, resources for physical health. Like the
Mhm.
ease with which they seek help for their physical health, they may be able to seek help for their mental well-being as well, and they don't accrue unnecessarily added on problems like, then dependence on food, alcohol, unprotected, like, just what is the word, they don't sleep around recklessly. There's no sexual recklessness that is being practiced, no substances being abused, no alcohol. Chalo, if you're not doing any of these things, even repressing all of these things like I did for 12 years, I feel if I got the right
Yeah,
kind of help, if I agreed to like work on it much earlier, I probably wouldn't even have come to this stage. So time is also very crucial. You can't there's so much riding on how much time also you're taking, because nothing truly stays the same way if left alone. If I leave an object unattended, it'll gather dust. If I leave money in a bank account just like that and not do anything to it, I mean, it'll accrue interest. If I leave my concerns unattended, they will snowball. So
exactly.
we learned very young, we were taught these lessons very young. We were told a stitch in time saves nine. Let's not miss that crucial stitch, is my plea, my earnest, plea to everybody.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to this podcast. And I think uh, the advice that you're given, right? Just sharing your own journey, right? And being vulnerable to
Mhm.
people. That's a very, very huge step. And I think your insights as a person who has been through this journey and also as a
Mm,
psychologist, and they are quite
mm.
valuable. And especially the way
Thank
that you
you.
articulated each and every step, right? So
Uh-huh.
that's been very, very valuable. And thank you
I'm
so much
usually
for
Stephen,
coming
thank
to
you
this
so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm usually not so all over the place. This is probably the first time I'm speaking about my condition also publicly. And so my anxiousness and I don't know if you could tell, but my anxiousness was also running at an all-time high, and which is probably why I was mumbling and fumbling through the conversation. But I feel that that's also nice because this was challenging for me, and I'm glad that I hopefully had the courage and the fortitude to put forward even the not so perfect, in fact, the very flawed parts of myself also out there publicly. For the 15-year-old self of me who was even scared to step out because she wasn't an ideal size, this is a
Right.
huge victory. And I hope
Definitely.
that I made myself proud. And I hopefully the listeners won't judge me for my candid candor, but will probably something away from the conversation that we had quality wise.
Yes, and I think we have touched up upon a lot of topics, a lot of
Yes,
topics through this
hopefully.
whole journey,
Thank you for
and
being patient and listening to my whole story.
people would be able to connect to it in various ways.
I
And to
hope
all
so.
the listeners listening, it's once again a reminder that this podcast is not meant as a treatment process for
Hmm.
you. It is something that when you listen to it, if you feel that you've been going through the same journey, right, this podcast should encourage you to seek help, seek
Hmm.
professional help. And that is the main aim of the podcast. And for other people who are listening to the podcast, right, it make you more empathetic individuals who would be able to understand each other well and give good form of support to each other.
Absolutely.
It's been an amazing time. So to all the listeners, if you find this podcast valuable, please share it with as many people as you can, right, so it can help other people. Okay, so see you later on in the next podcast.